lot of us would. You leave the 9 to 5, all of a sudden you've got 8-10 hours a day now that you can play with. So I started scraping on Kijiji, just looking, for any sort of unique opportunities. I saw this one posting looking for a bookkeeper. And so because my skill set was in accounting and corporate finance, it was somewhere where I knew I'd be able to excel. And just the way the ad was written, it was like, I'm a real estate investor looking for a part-time bookkeeper. I do some interesting projects, things of that nature. I was like, well, this is kind of cryptic. So I reverse searched the email address, found out it was actually from a local developer here who he was in the process. He had a $20 million parcel of land, some of the most sought after land here in London, where he was going to build 2,000 new homes or a 2,000 family community. And I was immediately like, oh man, I will work for free. I'll do whatever it takes. I just want to be exposed to you and your ecosystem. And, I'll work for free. It doesn't matter. He was kind of intrigued based upon my application. So we sat down and hit it off immediately because he'd built himself up from nothing as a real estate investor, similar to my story. And I started working for him as a bookkeeper. And about a month into that relationship, he turned to me and was, he was in the process of downsizing all of his existing portfolio because he really wanted to focus on this big masterpiece project. And he turned to me and was like, Matt, you know what? I want you to sell my block. And so he owned 20 bachelor apartments on this one corner of a block. He affectionately called them his crack houses. So that gives you kind of an idea of the condition they were in. They'd really been run down. He owned them outright, so it really didn't matter to him. He was always cash flowing no matter what. And he bought it for a song during kind of one of the downtimes in the previous decade. And so from that, I was like, he asked me if I would be willing to sell it on Kijiji for him because he's like, you're good with the internet. He's like, just go sell it for me. I was like, I can't, Peter, conflict of interest because I'm the buyer. And so after he got done laughing at that, he was like, well, what do you want? Or how much will you offer for that property? I was like, you tell me a price. He said 400,000. I said, I couldn't say yes fast enough. He literally was like, that was too fast. 440. I was like, yes. And he was like, okay, let's do it. And so I knew that these were really troubled properties and it was going to be a real uphill battle to turn them around. So we're literally talking about drug dealers on the corner, right? So really had to clean up the building. For a couple months, I sank a lot of my time and energy and literally even at times just hung out the building to try and be a good influence and keep an eye on it. But from that kind of intense work and finding the right JV partner who could allow us to buy the property all in cash. So I found a JV partner who was a former coworker who had a HELOC for up to 800,000. So we borrowed 450 from that, bought the property, closed on it. I only really needed to do about 10 or 20,000 in strategic renovations. It was really about getting that tenant turnover and getting the drug dealers off of the corner. From that, within under 6 months, we were able to get that 440,000 purchase appraised for 1.13 million.
Wow.
And so that was really when I was like, oh, proof of concept. I'm not crazy. Real estate is the future for myself. Mm-hmm. And that gave me the confidence to just run wild. So awesome. That 20 unit purchase was kind of how I was able to cheat my way to 32 units so fast that year. But once I had that confidence and momentum, there was just no looking back, in my opinion.
Yeah. Cool. And then, so what did the year after that look like?
So the year after that, I don't remember the exact unit count, but I probably picked up another 10 or 20 units. It wasn't quite as robust because I just didn't find the right big building. Yeah. It was 2017. We were coming across, I think it was our lowest inventory on market at that time. So things were getting very competitive. We were getting into multiple offers. It was the first time in my investing career I had stumbled into multiple offers. And I was like, market's too hot. I'm going to take a step back. So I was really strategic with what I bought. Now, obviously, since 2017, things only kept going up. So with hindsight, I wish I would have been more aggressive. But at that point in time, based upon what I'd had, I'd grown so much that I was scared of outgrowing my capabilities. And so I didn't want to do that because even taking on that 20-unit building, it at times pushed me to my limit.
Yeah, yeah. So what are your thoughts on that now that you've been through quite a bit? What are your thoughts on the fear that you were feeling at that time that held you back from continuing to grow? Do you think that was a good thing, ended up being a good thing that you kind of slowed down a little bit, or do you feel like you should have gone after more?
With hindsight, I think I should have gone after more. That being said, for myself, the bigger lesson, and it took me a long time to realize this, is there's no point when you're done learning. There's no point when the journey's over. This entire process of being a real estate investor, personal development, whatever you kind of want to call it, being an entrepreneur, there's no done. It's a continuous iterative process. And so one of the things I've realized is the only way that I know that I'm growing as an individual is when I can look back on the problems I had 6 months or a year ago and laugh about how small they are.
Right.
That's the sign to me that I'm really growing. So literally my day-to-day problems today would have been the most stressful thing I could have ever imagined 4 years ago. And I suspect that the things that are the most stressful thing in my life right now, in fact, I hope 4 years from now, I'll look back and laugh about what tiny little anthills the mountains I'm trying to climb today were with hindsight.
Are you willing to share what some of those fears are today? You don't have to go into detail, but maybe just anything that you can think of.
Sure. Yeah. So like, and I'm happy to go at least high level into detail on this. So sometimes you need to be aggressive in this market if you want to really get good deals. Right now, at the time of this shooting, we're still going through, self-isolation, social distancing, quarantine, and all that. So right now there's a lot of uncertainty and volatility in this market, and it can be scary, and you can naturally want to just sit on the sidelines and just wait things out. But at the same time, I'm acutely aware that it's when others are fearful that often those are when the best opportunities are available, because our competition's scared as well. So recently on a 31 unit apartment building, we came to a kind of a crossroads where we were at the end of our condition period. We'd already asked for one extension because we weren't able to get appraisers in the building because of all the craziness going on. We finally got the appraiser through, but then we weren't able to get the final like rubber stamp from the lender on the deal. And so it was either let the deal die and risk someone else coming in and buying it, or go firm on like a $3 million purchase when I don't have $3 million in cash.
Yeah.
And so that's one of those scary things where I was like, you know what? I've got the right connections. We're on the cusp of getting official approval from the credit union. Let's take that little leap of faith. 2 years ago, I would have not been comfortable doing that whatsoever. I would have let that deal die, and I would have been like, you know what? There's always another deal. And there is always another deal, but you also need to be cognizant of when you've got a great deal. This property I was looking at buying in London was under $100,000 a unit. The most recent multifamily sales have been around 150, 160 a unit. Now, these aren't apple to apple comparisons, but even if I'm buying bachelor apartments and those comps are for 1 and 2 bedroom apartments, there's a strong argument that I'm buying severely, discounted based upon the current market environment. So it's often knowing and trusting in my numbers is still, even to this day, sometimes a challenge, because those emotions are always running in the back of your head.
Yeah, for sure. And especially at a time like this where there's so much uncertainty in the market. What are you doing to ensure that you're protected? Because there is obviously like certain tenants are having rent strikes, and then there's no evictions and this and that. What kind of precautions are you taking at this time?
Certainly right now, we don't find ourselves in an ideal scenario for landlords. That being said, we need to focus on what we can control. So I can't control when the landlord tenant board reopens, right? But I can control the relationship I have with my existing tenants. So before April 1st, we tried to take a proactive measure to reach out to tenants just like a few days before April 1st, because we were also waiting to try and see what the government was going to announce. So it was a little bit of this like, game of chicken, where I'm like, I don't want to ask too soon to the tenants because I need to see if the government's going to roll out some sort of crazy program for stimulus or support. But at the same time, I don't want to wait till April 1st and find out some of my tenants are struggling. So really building those relationships, keeping clear lines of communication, as well as setting expectations. So far, the month of April has gone well for us. We didn't really see any sort of delinquencies